Hey guys, today we're taking a look at the elongated foam core power paddles on the market right now. I'm going to go over them and talk about when I would recommend a paddle for someone, but also talk about what my current favorite one is. Is it still the bread and butter Loco? Have I changed my mind about the Boomstik? Or has the Quanta been a huge disruptor to this market, and does it compete against everyone at only $99? Let's find out. Alright, now the paddles we'll be taking a look at today are going to be the BodyHelix Flik F1, Selkirk Boomstik, Bread and Butter Loco, Sypik Avatar, Luzz Pro for Inferno, Sword and Shield J7NF, and the upcoming Ronbus Quanta R3. Now there's actually one more paddle we're going to talk about that isn't a foam core paddle, but I did want to add it onto the list because it is a recent release I do enjoy, and because it doesn't use a honeycomb core, and that's the Gearbox GX2 Power. So 8 paddles in total. I'm going to give high-level overviews of them and talk about when I would recommend each to a certain player, do a few comparisons, and say which one is my overall top pick. Now before we get started, I do want to talk more about my own personal process and how I do my videos. For those of you familiar with my channel, you know that I don't often quantify my experiences and instead go mainly on feel and side-by-side testing. I will include metrics such as swing weights and twist weights, but when talking about overall firepower, feel, and spin, I like to use my in-game experience here. I know I can get more accurate numbers with a radar gun, but the reason I do it this way is because when I start hitting a paddle, I like to go in blind without knowing the numbers, so I don't have anything to unintentionally sway my thoughts on how the paddle should feel. The way I see it is, if I can't tell a big difference between the metrics of two paddles without the numbers, then I don't think the average player would be able to either, and I don't see those numbers as being too beneficial in that case. Also, just because a radar gun is telling me a paddle can hit hard from a baseline serve, it won't necessarily translate to a similar power level in-game. Because of factors like the swing weights and balance, that can affect my shot selection and stroke mechanics, leading to different experiences in-game than what the numbers would say. That said, I'm not knocking on the value of the quantitative data, and I will add links to some paddle databases in the video description that I encourage you to supplement this data with. My goal is to provide you all with my personal experiences combined with my knowledge and experience from hitting many different paddles over the years to help you make a more informed decision in today's paddle market. But yeah, just wanted to give you all a look into how I do things on the channel, and I hope this helps give you guys some insight into my process. But onto the topic at hand, let's talk about the more plush paddles on this list first. So these paddles are the ones that have a softer impact feel than the stiffer feel of power paddles with honeycomb cores. Let's start with the BodyHelix Flik F1. This is one of the most powerful paddles on this list, ranking in at number 2 for overall firepower. Mine has a swing weight of 116 and a twist weight of 6.35. I quite enjoyed the feel off the face once I started hitting with it. It's more plush compared to something like a YOLO Pro 4, though the high power and pop does make it difficult to control. I have heard people say that the paddle does have an unforgiving sweet spot that's comparable to a PaddleTech TKO, but I personally don't agree with that. I do think the paddle comes in a little light with the lower swing weight for an elongated paddle, and because of that the stability is on the lower end and the sweet spot isn't as forgiving as some of the other paddles on this list, but I wouldn't say it's as small as a TKO, and don't think there's as sharp of a drop-off on the off-center shots. For my weight setup, I was feeling a bit Boomstik-esque, so I went with 0.1 ounce strips at the 9 and 3 positions, and this setup felt fine for me. If you're looking for a paddle with top-tier power and a more plush feel off the face, then that's where I would recommend the Flik. As for those of you that don't want the stiffer feel most power paddles have, but also don't want to sacrifice on power. That said, if you do want an even softer feel off the face in a power paddle, then that's going to be the Gearbox GX2 Power. For the swing weight, I got 118, and twist weight, I got 6.21, which is pretty standard for its shape. This is a bit of an interesting one because, in my opinion, it's one I don't think many people will enjoy when they first pick it up, as there is a break-in period before you get those high levels of power, and I do think there is a slight learning curve to get used to the paddle feel. Out of the box, I didn't think this was a power paddle, but eventually after a few hours of play, you do feel the face soften up a bit more, and the power spikes up to the realm of a YOLO Pro 4 Perseus. As for the ball feel, this is one that absorbs the most impact off the ball the most and is similar to the original GX2 series. But the difference here is that you get more of a hollow feedback at the end that's like some of the Gen 3 power paddles. Because of this, I do think there is a slight disconnect between the power of the paddle and the feel, because usually we associate plusher paddles with having more control, but that's not the case here, and the ball pops off faster than you expect, which is why I think this paddle does have more of a learning curve. I don't think it's a difficult one though, as I was able to get used to it after a few play sessions, and it's rewarding for those of you that dislike the stiffer Gen 3 power paddle feel and want the most muted paddle option out there. While I don't think it's as easy to pick up as a flick out of the box, I do think it overall is a more forgiving paddle once you get used to it, and it's the recommendation I give to people who want the plushest feeling power paddle on the market. Moving on, let's talk about the stiffer paddle options on this list, and that's going to be the Avatar Sypik and the Luzz Pro 4 Inferno. Now with the Inferno, we know it's a floating MPP foam core, which is different than the EPP foam that most paddles on this list use. And with the way Luzz has constructed it, this is the stiffest and most powerful paddle on this list. Think the hollow and stiff feedback you get from a Gen 3 honeycomb power paddle and go a step up from that, and that's where you'll see the Inferno. At times, it did feel like I was hitting with a stiff wooden board on impact. It's the one that's most similar to a Gen 3 power paddle on this list, so this is the option I would consider if you wanted a supposedly more durable foam core construction with top-tier power while having a familiar feel to a Gen 3 polypropylene core. For mine, it came with a swing weight of 121 and a twist weight of 6.55, so overall it leans towards the heavier end of elongated paddles. Meanwhile, the Avatar Sypik is pretty similar to the Inferno, but it comes in lighter. I know it's also a floating core as well, but while they haven't mentioned the type of foam, I'm convinced that it's the same as the Inferno because the impact feel between the two is so similar. I see the Sypik as a slightly toned down version of the Inferno because mine came lighter out of the box, so I did need to add perimeter weighting in order to open up the power and sweet spot more. For the swing weight, I got 116, and the twist weight, I got 6.25, but I did think that compared to the Inferno and to the other paddles on this list, it was lacking a bit in sweet spot and stability. I added 0.5 grams per inch tuning tape from the 10 and 2 down to the 8 and 4 positions of the paddle, and with this setup, the stability and sweet spot improved, and I found the paddle to be closer in power to the Boomstik, but with a different stiffer feel. Overall, not a bad option for people that also want the stiffer and hollow Gen 3 power feel, but with a bit more weight customization compared to the Inferno, though at the cost of less overall power. Alright, now let's take a look at the last 4 paddles on this list, which are in the middle here, but we'll start with the Honolulu Pickleball Company's Sword and Shield J7 NF. It's basically the J2 NF but in their J7 shape, so think an elongated version of their J2 NF. Though this version of the J7 shape does come in with some rather low numbers, a swing weight of 114 and a twist weight of 5.83, so I did need to add much more weight on this. That swing weight number is comparable to the hybrid J2 shapes, while the twist weight is about 1 whole point lower, which isn't good. I used 1 gram per inch tungsten tape starting from the 10 and 2 positions and went down to the throat, and then covered the whole thing with electrical tape, which I found to bump up the stability and power to be in a more manageable state. Though even with all the weight, compared to the other paddles on this list, this does sit at the bottom for overall firepower. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, however, as I do think it does make it more accessible because it does have more control than the other paddles here. It does have that poppy fiberglass feel that we see on the NF, but because it is a step down compared to something like the Pro 4 Perseus, it is the easiest paddle on this list to use, but you won't have that same power as the others at the kitchen line and on putaways. Overall, I do think it's a solid paddle that barely squeaks into the power category to be included here, and it's still a great choice for people that don't want that top tier power, but want something more beginner friendly with control. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the last 3 paddles, the Boomstik, the Loco, and the Quanta R3 all together, because there have been quite a few comparisons people have been making. Let's start with the Boomstik. Now admittedly, I haven't been a huge fan of this paddle, but I will say that after putting much more time into it, I am starting to like the feel more. Out of the box, I felt this paddle to be too stiff feeling with minimal dwell time that made it very hard to connect with my shots. Over time, I have felt the paddle face soften up more, getting a better ball pocketing than before, and I really noticed this when I hit this side by side against brand new Boomstiks I try out. People that demo mine always tell me that they prefer the feel of the one I have now versus their newer models because they can feel the ball better with the softened up version. Now for my boomstick, I got a swing weight of 120 and a twist weight of 7.50. So the swing weight is slightly on the higher end, but the twist weight itself is very stable for an elongated paddle. That's due to the MOI tuning system, which I personally am not a huge fan of. I would have preferred not having this and being able to customize with weight better on my own, but even just beyond that, I'm not a fan of how the tuning system sticks out, because if I did want to add weight on my own, it does make it more difficult to add weight in that area if I wanted to. While it does have very good metrics, if you were someone who did want the paddle to have either more top or bottom heavy balance rather than the weight at 9 and 3, the MOI system does get in the way here. That said, I still think this is a great performance power paddle. I rank it at number 3 in overall firepower, and while it does have a stiff feel, you do get a quick rebound in the face from the ball pocketing, which does help with the overall feel. Now compared to the Loco, the gap does shrink a bit in terms of which one I prefer over the other, but I'm still going to give this one to the Loco. It does come in with metrics that aren't quite as nice, as the swing weight is the same at 120, but the twist weight is much lower at 6.25. It leans slightly heavy for an elongated paddle, so this may be a turnoff for those of you needing a lighter paddle. But for me, I ended up doing some tungsten tape at the 9 and 3 positions with electrical tape all around, which bumped the swing weight up to 123 and the twist weight to 6.65, which puts the paddle more in the realm I felt comfortable with. The Loco does utilize a layer of fiberglass in the surface mixed in with a carbon fiber, which I personally am a big fan of. If you look at my track record of paddles that I've enjoyed, the Core Super Quartz, the OG 11624 All Quartz and Powers, and Gherkin Nightshade, you'll notice how I've enjoyed paddles that have that fiberglass layer blended in. I like that poppy ball feel it gives and the extra juice it gives on the shots. For the feel of the paddle, I like to compare it to the Yola Pro 4 Perseus, since that's the paddle many people are more familiar with. The fiberglass gives it the extra punch off the face, and the foam core gives it more of a fuller impact in comparison to the Pro 4, which has a lighter impact. The overall firepower is a step above it as well, and compared to all the other paddles on this list, the Loco sits around in the middle of the pack at number 4. I see it as a toned-down version of the boomstick with a more predictable feel of the face that I personally connect better with. To me, this is the best all-around power option on this list and my current favorite out of all the paddles here. But there's one more paddle we're going to talk about, which is the biggest disruptor in the market right now, and that's the Ronbus Quantas. Specifically for this video, we'll be talking about the flat top R3 shape, which comes in with a very low swing weight of 110 and an equally low twist weight of 5.61. The Quanta is basically the opposite of the boomstick because it comes in so light in stock form, giving you a lot of room for customization. It's basically the Franklin C45 of the power paddles. As you can expect from the low numbers, the paddle is very maneuverable, but also very unstable out of the box. And personally, I think all the Quanta shapes are not usable in stock form and really need perimeter weighting added. For my setup on the R3, I use 1 gram per inch tungsten tape from the 10 and 2 corners down to the throat of the paddle, and then covered everything in electrical tape, bringing the swing weight up to 119 and the twist weight to 6.65. Now there's one thing about light paddles that not many people talk about. Perimeter weighting via weighted tape isn't a one-to-one replacement and will always feel different against a paddle that comes in heavier stock. Because in these light paddles, you can only add more weights along the perimeters, and heavier paddles may have more weight distributed internally. So even if you do match the total static weight on the outside, it won't match the ball feel. Because of that, that's why the Quanta can never fully replicate the boomstick or Loco. While there are similarities in the feel compared to those two paddles, the Quanta has a lighter feel when you hit the ball, and it isn't as full and substantial as the other two paddles. While adding weight can get you to them similar in power, the paddle still has that lighter feel, and it doesn't quite match this ability. However, with the lighter feel, the Quanta does bring its own niche into the market by being very customizable and having the ability to be tailored to your liking. But regarding the customization, this is something I do want to warn people about if you haven't done this before. I personally only recommend these super light paddles that need customization, like the Pursuit Pro 1s, C45s, and now the Quantas, for people who either enjoy customizing or know what they're doing when they want to add weight to the paddle. While yes, there are guides on how to add tape and places to put it, and some people do give recommendations for their setups, these aren't one-size-fits-all situations, and they may not be what you yourself want in a paddle's weight distribution. The reason I say this is because after the C45 release, I did have multiple people reach out asking for assistance on where they should be adding the weight. But in my opinion, if you are going for one of these lighter paddles and don't know exactly where you generally like weight on your paddles, then expect to spend some time experimenting and figuring out your own personal preferences, or you may end up frustrated with your experience trying to figure out your own weight setup. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that the paddle needs to be customized. I actually think it's great that there is a power paddle on the market that offers this flexibility, but I just want to give a warning for people who want to pick this up and expect a paddle they can pick up and play out of the box. Now, with all that out of the way, is the Quanta a performance paddle that can stack up to the others on this list? Well, if we put all the paddles at that $200 price point, yes, I do think the Quanta keeps up with all of them, but only after you add weight onto it. Now, the lighter feel it has gives it a different feel than all the others, so it doesn't really replace any of these on the list, and its stability isn't quite up to par even with all the external weight you add, but the flexibility and high performance it offers lets it stand against all the other performance paddles. But the kicker is that the Quanta is actually significantly cheaper than every paddle on this list at only $99 after a discount code, which is a ridiculous price, giving it crazy good value. I do think that the price being this low makes it a very easy recommendation, as now is a fantastic option for people that either want a power paddle on a budget or want a power paddle with that customization. So with price in consideration, which paddle would I pick out of all of these? While this does make the decision more difficult, if I did want the best performing paddle I would be using for tournaments that I see myself playing the best with, then that would still be the bread and butter Loco, which is a little over $80 more expensive after a discount code. I do think that if these were Gen 2 or Gen 3 polypropylene core paddles that did have a shorter shelf life, my decision will be different, and I would recommend the Quanta a lot more here. But because this is a list of more durable Gen 4 foam core paddles, I myself don't mind the extra price to get better performance out of my game for competitive play and would still opt for the Loco. That said, which of these paddles on this list would I take over the Loco if they were priced low at $99? The runner-up here would be the Selkirk Boomstik. I will admit that my mind has changed on this paddle and I'm liking the feel more now that the face has softened up a bit, but I still prefer the fiberglass feel of the Loco and don't enjoy the built-in MOI tuning system, so even if it were cheaper, I wouldn't pick it up. The one paddle I would consider though would be the Gearbox GX2 Elongated. This is a funny answer because the feel is completely different from the Loco and Boomstik, but I do think that with time, I can see myself getting used to the feel and enjoying it, and at $99, I do think that paddle would be very hard for me to beat. Alright, well there you have it. There's my list of the top performance Gen 4 paddles on the market right now. So just to recap, as a quick TLDR, if you want a Gen 4 with top tier power, but without that stiff feel commonly associated with the paddles, then go for the BodyHelix Flik F1. If you want the most muted feeling power paddle on this list, then get the Gearbox GX2 Power, that is, if you're okay spending time breaking it in first. For the stiffest feeling paddles that are more similar to the Gen 3 power cores, go for the Luzz Inferno for the most powerful paddle on this list, but for something more toned down, go for the Sypik Avatar. If you want a power paddle with more control, then that would be the J7NF, and if you want a light and super customizable paddle, or the cheapest option available if you are on a budget, then that's the Ronbus R3 Quanta. Finally, for a top tier power paddle that's got great performance out of the box, go for the Selkirk Boomstik. And finally, for what I think is the best all-around Gen 4 power paddle on this list, and my personal favorite, go for the bread and butter Loco. Alright, and now for today's Pickleball adjacent product of the video, we're going to talk about the clothes from Centerline Athletics. Now you guys have probably seen me wear these clothes before, but they're a brand I've started working with recently, and they are making high quality performance athletic wear, and right now they're targeting the pickleball community. I've been really impressed with the quality of their clothes, so think to the level of Lululemon or Vuori. So if you're more familiar with clothes from pickleball paddle equipment stores, think a step up from beyond those. I've been really happy with everything that they've had, so the performance shirts are nice. I really like the material, the fit. It's elastic and fits well over me. Same with the sweater. But fun thing about this is when I'm standing up, this moving around, you actually can't tell, but there's actually a pocket up here in the front. And last thing is the shorts here. So for those of you that do wear athletic wear with the drawstring, you know it can be a hassle when you throw it into the wash or the dryer. So it's a really nice feature that they have the drawstring actually connected and have a nice way of tightening it and keeping track of it. But yeah, overall, very impressed with the quality of these clothes and I'm really excited to start working with them. Now, if you do want to pick any of these clothes up, I do have a 20% off code that I will add in the video description below. Anyways, that's it for today's videos on my take on the current Gen 4 power paddles on the market right now. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you do want to support this channel and pick any of them up, or if you do want any clothes from Centerline Athletics, I've added my discount code as well as a link to buy them in the video description below.